Hello, I am Georgia Menta, a postdoctoral researcher in economics at the Luxembourg Institute of Socioeconomic Research. With the research group at the University of Luxembourg, we have been exploring several aspects of individuals' lives during the pandemic in 5 different European countries. Using longitudinal data we collected in the framework of the Pandemic Project, we have focused on how individuals' incomes have changed during the early onset of the COVID-19 health crisis. With the pandemic being an unprecedented health and economic shock, we started wondering about the consequences of this unique combination of a higher health hazard, confinement measures and recovery measures, as well as their timeliness, on the distribution of incomes in Europe. When I talk about income here, I refer to 2 features of the income distribution. The first one is the shape of the income distribution, so the shape of the blue line in the graph that we can interpret as inequality. The second one is the left tail of the income distribution, which is made up of people below the poverty line, indicated in red in the graph. So we use different ways of measuring poverty and inequality in our data, and what we find across these measures is a pretty consistent story. When comparing the income distributions in Europe before the pandemic and at the end of the first year of pandemic, not much seems to have changed in terms of poverty and inequality. Poverty slightly increased and inequality slightly decreased, but no major changes seem to have occurred. However, when we dig further into what happened in the early months of the pandemic, we find that both inequality and poverty substantially increased during those first months. However, these are just net distributional effects that describe what happened overall during the first year of the pandemic. So we wanted to take one step back and try to understand what role did public policy play on the trends that we find, and in particular, whether measures adopted during the pandemic had an impact on individual income changes. Here we use 2 types of policies, summarized into indices produced by the University of Oxford. The stringency index refers to lockdowns and confinement measures, while the economic support index refers to the monetary and non-monetary help that was provided to families and workers during the pandemic. What we found with our data, keeping constant the evolution of the number of COVID deaths, is that an increase in the generosity of the economic support has a positive impact on individual incomes, as one would expect. Instead, as governments implement more stringent confinement measures, there does not seem to be any consequences on individual income. However, this average zero effect has substantial heterogeneity. An increase in the stringency of confinement measures severely affects the incomes of vulnerable groups, such as women, those below 40 years old, and people who were below the poverty line in January 2020. You can find out more about our work on the website pandemic.uni.lu.